Hello there. Welcome back to Migraine Relief Hotline. I'm Kelly, the migraine dietitian, and today we're going to be talking about some of the hidden stressors that can lower your migraine threshold. So last episode, we talked a little bit more about approaching migraine management via trigger management and threshold management and how we can kind of combine those two to get the best results. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into some of the things that can affect your threshold that maybe aren't as obvious, okay? Because there are stressors and imbalances within the body that we're not always going to feel, right? You don't necessarily feel something like, low ferritin or low vitamin D until it's pretty darn low. You don't necessarily feel chronic inflammation. You don't necessarily know that your blood sugar is bouncing all over the place. You just know that your migraine is hard to control. Maybe you don't feel good every so often, but some of these imbalances can feel kind of vague as far as symptoms go. So let's dive into those today. And specifically, we're going to be talking about physical imbalances, but I think it would be cool for us to talk about other types of hidden stressors because there are also environmental things that can be hidden stressors, like the entertainment we consume or different things that we're exposed to throughout the day or certain thought patterns. So let me know if you would be interested in an episode on those types of hidden stressors as well, because I think that's just as interesting and just as impactful sometimes. So when it comes to stress on the body, any stress is stress. So whether it's obvious or hidden, whether it's very real stress or maybe stress that we're creating for ourselves. If you tend to be a worrier or a catastrophizer, whether it's bad stress or good stress. So stress of dealing with a chronic health condition like migraine versus the stress of getting married or going on a fun vacation, right? Both are stress, and our body kind of treats all stress equally. Your brain is constantly adapting to what's inside your body and what's outside of your body, even when you don't notice it. So every little thing your body has to compensate for takes energy and takes effort from your body. And if there are a lot of things that your body's having to compensate for, or even just, one major thing or a couple of major things, that's going to impact us, not only with migraine, which is, why we're here, but also your health overall. Nothing happens in a vacuum when it comes to the body. So I'm going to go through some of the most common hidden stressors that I see working with my clients and that I've also experienced myself. And then we'll dig more into a few of them. Okay, so nutrient deficiencies, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, poor gut health. That can be its own series. Chronic stress, under eating, low vitamin D, low B12. Those are just a few. And I'm going to add low iron to that list actually, because that's a pretty common one, low iron, low ferritin. So all of these hidden stressors, all of these different imbalances affect your migraine threshold. And they can also come with other symptoms that can kind of clue you into the fact that this might be something you need to look more into. So nutrient deficiencies, and really this would be micronutrient deficiencies, not to be annoying about it, but things like vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, fatty acids, and these are things that we need in certain amounts. We don't want too much of them, but we don't want too little of them. And if we have the wrong amount in our system, then that can lead to different issues, different symptoms, different imbalances. Some of the most common deficiencies for those of us with migraine, the people that I work with, it's going to be vitamin D, the B vitamins, so B12, folate, riboflavin, those are going to be big ones, iron and iron-related labs, which that could also be its own episode. We'll probably have to do that too. And then even though this one isn't tested for as much, omega-3 fatty acids are also a common deficiency that I see whenever we do have the opportunity to test for it. Vitamin D is super common. That one's a little bit different than the other vitamins and minerals because we're not getting it from food. I mean, there are some foods that have vitamin D either added to them or in very small amounts, but our main source of vitamin D is sunlight. And so you can kind of already start to see why people with migraine are much more prone to this deficiency because a lot of us have light sensitivity. A lot of us aren't going outside very often and hanging out in the sunlight and getting that UV exposure. And that's kind of the case with everyone today. We're spending a lot more time inside than outside, but for people with migraine, it's even more so. And vitamin D, whenever we become deficient or low in this vitamin, it can cause certain types of issues. So we know through research that it's been linked with harder to manage migraine, more severe, more frequent migraine attacks. Low vitamin D can also affect your mood. The tricky thing with a lot of these deficiencies is that it's happening gradually over time. So those symptoms associated with that are going to accumulate over time, and it may be hard for you to notice those types of symptoms because they do happen so gradually. So you can do this on your own, or when working with someone like myself or chatting with your doctor, is thinking back over the past few years even and looking at things like your mood, looking at things like your migraine control. Did those things worsen? And is there an obvious reason, or could it be one of these hidden stressors like a vitamin D deficiency? Now, our B vitamins fluctuate much more rapidly because they're water-soluble vitamins versus fat-soluble like vitamin D. Your body stores fat-soluble vitamins, but it doesn't store, for the most part, water-soluble vitamins like vitamin B. So it fluctuates a lot more rapidly, and you can become deficient in it a lot more rapidly. Now, in theory, that also means that they're easy to correct, these deficiencies, depending on what's causing them. Low B12 is a big one. With low B12, it can impact migraine. You'll also deal with significant fatigue as that deficiency gets worse. Now, B12 is a little bit different than the other B vitamins. You do store some vitamin B12, not to get too confusing here, but if you're dealing with fatigue, low B12 could be one reason why. Low iron is also another potential contributor to fatigue. And you may also notice things like feeling kind of faint or lightheaded or dizzy. The other B vitamins are honestly pretty similar to that. Your riboflavin, your folate, those are also going to look like low energy. And this is because a big role of B vitamins in the body is to help with energy production, turning food into energy inside your mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. So if you're low in B vitamins, really across the board, it's going to make you tired. And then depending on what B vitamin you're low in, it can also come with its own, unique symptoms. But if you're dealing with fatigue and you're not really sure why, getting a vitamin and mineral panel, or at least trying to get your doctor to run B vitamins and an iron panel, is a really good place to start. And vitamin D, honestly, why not? Throw that one in there. Omega-3, I mentioned that one earlier. That's also a relatively common deficiency, but it is harder to get tested for. So we're not going to cover that one too much, but I'm happy to do another episode more about omega-3s and omega-6s and kind of the balance of those within the body if y'all want me to do that. So definitely let me know there. Now let's move on to inflammation. And this one's going to tie into a lot of other hidden stressors, because inflammation isn't just going to happen for no reason. There's always going to be an underlying cause of that inflammation, whether it's one big cause or multiple. And one way you can kind of get a good idea of whether or not inflammation is something you need to worry about is, again, a lab test. It's looking at something called CRP, which stands for C-reactive protein, and that is a very commonly used marker of inflammation on your labs. There's also something called high sensitivity CRP, HS-CRP. There are also many other types of ways to evaluate systemic inflammation or body-wide inflammation, both using blood tests and other methods, but CRP is going to be the most common, the most easy to get from your doctor. Now, when we're talking about causes of inflammation, that could be something like a gut health imbalance. It could be due to stress hormones. It could be due to deficiencies, micronutrient deficiencies. It can be something like an autoimmune condition. So investigating further is definitely required there. We also want to look at your diet, of course, and figure out ways that we can lower inflammation as far as that goes. But circling back to gut health, this can, of course, contribute to inflammation throughout the body. It can also be its own hidden stressor and contribute to a lower migraine threshold. And gut health can be a little bit tricky because you're not always going to have super obvious symptoms of a gut imbalance. So when we think of poor gut health, you're probably thinking of, IBS, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, that type of thing. And those definitely can come with gut imbalances, but they don't always. We're not always going to experience those depending on what's off and how well your body is able to compensate. Now, chronic stress is another big one, and this is also like inflammation where you can't just stop at saying, I have chronic stress. You need to dig deeper and figure out why and how to address it. But chronic stress isn't just something we feel, it's something that happens on a very physical level. So it can lead to issues with your stress hormone function or issues with your ability to bounce back from stress. You might feel like, okay, I should kind of be over this by now. Like if you're driving home and you, God forbid, almost get into a car accident, you'll feel that that like burst of stress hormones, that burst of adrenaline. Usually what's supposed to happen is we get that burst of stress, that physical stress reaction. We see, okay, I didn't get into an accident. We're good. We're fine. We're safe. And then you'll release that and the stress will dissipate. But if you have an issue with your stress response and your stress resilience or adaptation, then you might continue to feel keyed up from that for hours. So that's something that can absolutely affect our migraine threshold as well. And then one thing I haven't touched on, undereating is another thing that can not only contribute to like physical stress on the body, but it can directly impact migraine because we're not always even intentionally undereating, right? You may be undereating because your appetite's just not there and you struggle to eat. Or maybe you have a really low appetite in the morning, so you don't typically eat breakfast and you're really only eating like 2 meals a day instead of 3, so you're missing out on a third of your calories. It can also be due to nausea and those other types of symptoms that can come along with migraine, but then can affect migraine even more, right? So it's just this vicious cycle that we can get stuck into. And then sometimes, there's those of us who have ADHD and we just forget to eat or we get sucked into something else or, medications can be causing problems with eating. So there's all types of reasons behind this, but having a really detailed look at your diet, which I know sometimes can not sound very fun, but looking at your diet in an objective, curious way, collecting data, seeing if you're eating enough calories, protein, fat, carbs. That's something that I do for every single one of my one-on-one clients. We're looking through your food log and we're not doing that to judge what you're eating and say, too many fries, girl. No, because fries can fit. I love a good fry. We're doing that so we can make sure that you're eating enough calories and getting enough protein and all that other stuff, right? So, last thing I'm going to cover today is insulin resistance. And insulin resistance, without getting too deep into it, affects your body's ability to manage your blood sugar appropriately. This is an imbalance that can get worse and worse over time unless it's caught and fixed, which it definitely can be. You can definitely catch insulin resistance through labs. So this is another one that's really good to test for if you're feeling yucky after meals or your appetite's all over the place, or if you have major sugar cravings. And really, I love to have at least a fasting blood sugar and A1C done every single year to keep an eye on your blood sugar because, again, you're not going to feel when your blood sugar is out of balance necessarily. You're not going to feel insulin resistance necessarily. It can just kind of be brewing beneath the surface and quietly making your life harder. So we want to catch those things. Now, I've mentioned labs several times, and blood work can be very helpful, especially these more like traditional, easily accessible labs. Blood sugar, B vitamins, iron, those can be very helpful. They're often relatively easy to get if you have a primary care physician, and I'm talking about the US here specifically because I can't speak for other areas of the world, but more than likely you'll be able to get these labs drawn. But if you don't have a good primary care relationship or your doctor is less open to ordering lab work, then in a lot of areas you can order these labs yourself from like an Any Lab Test Now. The only thing is when you're ordering labs yourself is then you're left to deal with that information yourself. So that's the only thing I caution against. If you're ordering your own labs, I'd highly recommend trying to get someone to help you interpret them and apply them. And that is something that I help my clients with. So I can order labs for you depending on where you're located, or if you bring labs to me, then we can look through them together. We can make sure everything's in the optimal range, not just the normal range, right? So just use caution when ordering labs yourself. I know we're in the age of ChatGPT, and look, sometimes it gives good advice, sometimes it does not. So also be careful there if you're asking Chat or Gemini or whoever. Can be a little bit dangerous to take your medical advice from Chat. So probably goes without saying. I wanted to end this episode today with a little analogy that I think will help you put all of this into perspective and kind of remember why these hidden imbalances can be hidden until all of a sudden they're not. It's like a phone battery, whether it's at 100% or 5%. You're gonna, for the most part, be able to use your phone and do all the things you want to do. You might start getting like those low battery notifications. You might ignore those or even turn them on. And I think this is a good analogy for how some of these hidden imbalances present themselves. We can be trucking along with a vitamin D deficiency or a low vitamin D for quite a while and not really notice it. Or maybe we'll start to feel kind of tired. I'm going to swipe that tired notification away. Or maybe I'm just going to get more sleep. And it can keep going like that until all of a sudden your battery dies. That's at the point where it can kind of feel like all of a sudden everything gets so much worse, and all of a sudden your migraine attacks are way harder to manage and you can't keep your eyes open. But it's actually been brewing for quite a while, and it's just reached that 0%, and now the body can't compensate at all. I hope this helps give you some additional context as to why it's so important for us to not focus only on triggers and to think about all of these other things that can affect our threshold and our ability to handle trigger exposure. Because if you're dealing with multiple of these hidden stressors, you're going to feel so hypersensitive to triggers across the board. Uncovering and addressing these stressors, it's going to help improve your health overall, because we're not just a walking migraine, right? We are a human with a whole body and lots of areas that require support. So that's it for today. I'm going to meet you back here next week. And then if you have a topic that you want me to cover, or if I mentioned something in this episode that you want me to dive deeper on, just comment below and I will add it to the list. Make sure you're following, subscribed, share this with a friend if you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you later. Bye.